today is Draino, who runs one of the biggest Instagram accounts in conservative culture. We're going to talk about him getting kicked off Twitter, which I believe he has a lawsuit for, the future of the Republican Party, and a lot of stuff. But first, I'm going to play my Instagram reel and my TikTok that I made of Megan Fox talking about drinking MGK's blood in some sort of ritual. Here's that video, and then we're going to get our reaction.
Like, people are imagining us with like goblets and we're like Game of Thrones drinking each other's blood. It's just a few drops, but yes, we do consume each other's blood on occasion for ritual purposes only.
Oh, okay. Just a few drops for ritual purposes. Right.
It is used for a reason, and it is controlled where it's like, let's shed a few drops of blood and each drink it. He's much more haphazard and hectic and chaotic, where he's willing to just like cut his chest open with broken glass and be like, take my soul, let me bleed on you. It doesn't not happen, let me tell you.
Well, sounds like more than just a few drops. But I get it. I say tomato, you say let's drink each other's bloods and both go out in public dressed up like women. I guess to be fair, this is not the most masculine shirt that I own, but to each their own. I'ma stick with God. Good luck with those blood rituals. All right, what's going on, folks? I'm live here today with Draino. First of all, before we get into it, how are you doing?
Doing well. After watching that, I don't know how good I'm doing, but good overall.
I figured we start with the jump. Yeah, what do you think about that? I guess I respect the honesty of just saying it. You know, I guess some people keep that to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly just a cry for attention. I think they know it'll get headlines. Hollywood stars are known to be provocative to get attention because when you're just reading scripts, you're really not that important unless you have a new movie coming out. So you got to keep the hype going somehow. But deeper down, I think it could be something satanic involved. I'm not sure. I don't really know Satanism, but that doesn't sound very Christian.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I get Billboard magazines. I ordered just like I wanted to see the stats because me and Bryson, we hit one. So I was like, let me get a year-long subscription. And it was like the first one I got was Post Malone wearing a dress. And then the second one I got was like something else weird. And then the third one I got was MGK dressed as a woman. So it's, if it was just like one time, I know David Bowie used to dress up, whatever, but it almost seems like the agenda is so strong. And MGK was kind of like a street rapper coming up, but now he's going with like the emo dresses girls. I think her kids are trans and, they're out there drinking each other's bloods. I definitely think they want attention, but I do believe them. Like, I think they literally are drinking each other's blood. It's not for me.
Yeah, I do believe them as well. I think they announced that they did that when they got engaged. Who doesn't drink their person's blood when they get engaged? I mean, America in 2022, but very dark. Hollywood. I used to work in Hollywood. I think you used to live in LA. There's a dark energy in that city. I would say it's predominantly anti-God and a lot more favorable to Satanism overall. Again, I don't know if this is Satanism, but it's just very dark, and it's unfortunate that kids that follow these people are, exposed to this.
Right. I know like Christianity, Islam, they have books and not everybody follows it completely. I would argue that most probably don't, but they kind of have these rules and laws and morality codes that they're living by or trying to live by. And that's where I really wonder, because I've had an atheist phase too, where I was like, I could set my own moral code. But as politics has kind of gone on and, people's spiritualities have gone on, it's just almost like inverted reality where I'm wondering, people like that, are they just drinking each other's blood and like living under the same moral code as us, like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal? Or is their entire moral code like completely inverted where, none of the stuff that we believe is moral, there's certain things that used to be, no matter who you were, you're like, yeah, that's kind of like a moral thing to do. It almost seems as if they might not even believe any of that stuff. I don't know.
Well, in Christianity, Jesus said, this is my body, this is my blood, which be given up for you. And there's a ceremonial, with the wine and the bread, not actually drinking any real blood. So to me, it also could be kind of making a mockery of that or putting themselves on the same level as Jesus. I mean, until they have really provided an explanation, we're all just guessing. But, overall, It's obviously very bizarre.
This is definitely popular nowadays too. Even in like, I would say like yoga and spiritual communities, people say like, I'm a goddess, right? You see a lot of these like, chicks that are into different sorts of like spiritualities. Like, I'm a goddess, I'm a god. I'm seeing that more prevalent. Like people saying I am God.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they're doing it just as kind of like a trendy thing to say. and that it's not actually done in a way that, mocks God or tries to compare yourself to God. But there's definitely a loss of godliness in coastal California, I would say, not necessarily inland. And when you live and interact in other parts of the country, you realize how far off the cliff, LA and San Francisco has gone.
I wanted to say before we get into the next topic, overall, above politics news, the work you've been putting in, I appreciate you showing me and my brother a good time when we came to Florida. You and David took us around, showed us around. Me and my brother really appreciate that, and I'll always remember that and appreciate that you were a great host. And really, I had a few days out there, and I had a great time.
Well, you're welcome, brother. And I had people take me around when I first got here, and happy to be an unofficial tour guide for this beautiful state that I hope a lot of good people move to. And you're always welcome back.
We had alligator bites too, which were oddly delicious. I was surprised. They definitely tasted kind of like chicken.
Dinosaur bites. 200 million-year-old animal that you eat with spices now. It's so good.
They really do kind of look like, alligators and crocodiles. I went through like an hour binge watching. I don't know why, but I started just looking them up and I'm like, these are such crazy creatures. Same with, this is totally different, but a rhinoceros, where it almost has that dinosaur name, rhinoceros. Like some of these things in nature are just crazy. And I still live in California. I know it's not as bad. And like, it's not like alligators are everywhere, but my gosh, some of these alligators and crocodiles are just massive beasts. It's fascinating.
They're literal dinosaurs. In Florida, I say every animal here wants to kill you. We had a rattlesnake. We lived on a canal that connects with the ocean, and we had a rattlesnake swim up, and it was a eastern diamondback rattlesnake, which is literally the deadliest rattlesnake in all of North America. And I was like, so the rattlesnakes can swim in the ocean now? It's because I know there's rattlesnakes out in California, but everything wants to kill you in Florida.
Where was that? That was in Florida. That
was in St. Petersburg. Yeah, when I lived with Fleckus.
Okay, that's why I don't want to go to Australia. I feel like that's like Florida on steroids. With that, they got spiders the size of your head. I love Australians, but my gosh,
kangaroos don't even make sense.
They're kind of dope though.
I love them. Listen, I love the creatures. And nothing with Florida too. There's a lot of bird life, and the birds are huge. They're like pterodactyls down here. There's birds like 4 or 5 feet tall. Where I come from, there's like little chickadees. Down here, everything's just huge. Everything is just big.
Maybe we should start a conspiracy theory to blame DeSantis. DeSantis is feeding them, hyped up GOP food, and they're amping up the birds out there. The anti-gay food. That's what's making them so big. Procreate. But I want to talk about your Twitter lawsuit with all that stuff in the news. I know you got kicked off Twitter. I'm not 100% sure why, but I know. Let me know about that. How's that going?
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick wrap up. So we recently filed our lawsuit in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I've been in court for almost a year now. I'm represented by Harmeet Dillon and Ron Coleman, fantastic lawyers who represent James O'Keefe, Ben Shapiro, now Tulsi Gabbard. And other people, and they're the ones that stopped the vaccine mandate on behalf of Daily Wire. So they've got a track record of success. But long story short, I was on Twitter. I had maybe 400,000 or 500,000 followers. And during the election stuff in 2020, I'll be very careful what I say because we're on lots of mainstream social media. But I was not afraid to tweet about what I thought was happening, which wasn't above water or just. And turns out the California state government sent an email to Twitter in November of that year, 2020, saying that I was spreading election misinformation and to this thing called the partner portal at Twitter. And Twitter censored my tweet, gave me a strike. And then 6 or 7 weeks later, I quickly racked up 5 strikes on election stuff and was banned for election misinformation, which very strange because it was after the election. And all I said was, audit California elections. We all know there's fraud, rampant fraud nationwide, and California is one of the culprits. Do it to protect the integrity of that state's elections. That's it. I called for a political procedure. And if you look behind me there, that's my certification to practice law in the state of California. I'm a lawyer. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of California. And my own government, even though I don't live in California anymore, was targeting me for censorship. This is North Korea type stuff. So what happens is when the government outsources its unconstitutional actions, it's as if that private entity becomes an extension of the government, right? We want that. We don't want the government to just, tell cops or private security guards to arrest you for free speech. It's as if the police did it, right? We know it's a First Amendment violation. So that's what happened here. It's not a private company when Twitter is doing it on behalf of the government.
Right. The government requested it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's called a joint state actor. And there's a very long line of legal precedent for that. And here's the kicker. We got the smoking gun. We got the email where they sent it. Judicial Watch did a FOIA request. We got the email. They highlighted me in orange as like a high-level threat near President Trump and and sent it off. And then I got kicked off. So we got dismissed out of the Northern District of California by a very leftist judge. We're not surprised. We're now in the Ninth Circuit. We should have a hearing later this year. And, depending on which judges we get, it's a 16-13 balance now. Democrat appointed to Republican appointed judges, and we get 3 randomly assigned to us. I honestly hope we get 3 leftist judges and they just kick us out again, because then we go right to the Supreme Court. So that's my number one goal. I expect now with Elon, I will get my Twitter account back at some point, but I don't really care. I just want the Supreme Court to rule that we have some First Amendment rights on social media and that they are being infringed upon.
Right. So that's interesting. So your suit is focusing on the fact that the government kind of strong-armed Twitter to do it. And you're looking at now with Apple and Google. I saw, the very trusted and the very black Sean King. He tweeted something this morning saying that Apple and Google will rein in hate speech. It happened to Gab. That's why Gab's not on social media. Parler had that whole thing where they got taken down. Even Truth Social and Getter have to kind of walk on fine lines, because I won't say a full monopoly, but I would say almost monopoly between, there's not really many app stores. If you have an Apple iPhone or a Google, there's like 2 that I know of. Maybe there's another. So that's kind of their new game now is, okay, well, yeah, you can just make your own app. Oh, but you're not going to be on the App Store. Well, how could you have an app without the App Store? So this is the interesting place that we're in. And I know there's a lot of Republicans that are straight libertarian, like just let the businesses and corporations decide. But it's like you have government strong-arming Twitter. You have Apple and Google creating almost like a left-wing monopoly where they will not allow you to even exist. There does need to be something done about this. Lawsuits like your own, citizens like Elon Musk stepping up and doing something about it. I know a lot of people don't trust him. I want to get your take, but I'm just watching his feed, and I know I'm watching actions too. But I mean, to me, he kind of seems like a bro. And, maybe he's fooling us, but he's like posting Tim Pool memes. Like, to me, he seems like he really understands the First Amendment. And call me naive or foolish or whatever people want to think. I'm not going to plant a chip in my brain or anything, but I actually think he seems to get the First Amendment more than a lot of the GOP does.
He absolutely does. And he's an engineer. So, he wasn't bombarded with all the gender ideology and woke social justice stuff. He was too busy learning, how to build, mathematical equations to facilitate things. So he looks at it as, what's the best system to facilitate our constitutional rights. And, in today's world, being someone that adheres to the Constitution makes you a far right extremist when, less than 10 years ago, pretty much before the middle of Obama's second term, even all Democrats believe that no matter what, you have free speech.
Right.
But we've started to see there's a little chart. It showed the term hate speech just having an exponential curve for the first time ever in history. And it's a made up term. Misinformation, hate speech. It's just speech they hate. Right. It's information that goes against the narrative, because so many times we've seen people claim things that the, mainstream media and big tech will call misinformation or conspiracy theorists. It turns out to be completely true. So, the key thing is who determines what is truth. Right. And in America, we believe we have a marketplace of ideas, and the best ideas rise to the surface. If ideas are so bad, then they will be easily disproven with more speech, not censorship. And the left is petrified of more free speech because they know their ideas are terrible and
Right.
it's an oligarchy, and they have to make it seem like the allegory of the cave. They have to make all these common sense people feel like they're alone and crazy and they don't have the majority, when in fact we do. America is actually a center right country, just being controlled by very powerful media and big tech corporations.
Right. Some people hate the truth. So the truth could be hate speech. I know corporations, especially left wing ones, they hate basic, like, common sense. Politicians hate scrutiny. Big pharma hates people who don't love their products and show their products. So the word hate's interesting. I noticed because I follow you, typical liberal, a lot of Republicans on Twitter, but I do have some hip hop friends that are not really, I would say, left wing or right wing. They're kind of just like cultural. And one thing that I'm really shocked that they're falling for is this narrative. It's like this pipeline to convince like hip hop culture to be against free speech, which is crazy because it used to be, oh my gosh, they're trying to censor Eminem. They're trying to censor Kid Rock. It's so not cool to censor in music. I mean, music is artistic expression. I can't, but they're doing it by like the racism thing, right? Like, so, racism is bad. Elon Musk is racist, apartheid, South Africa. So, like, we need to censor hate speech because racists will be racist if we don't censor. And that's big government, big tech, big pharma, some of the world's wickedest people convincing Black culture, rap culture to be against their own interests. And it's shocking to see how many people are falling for it.
Yeah, having lived in Florida for 5+ years now, and having previously lived in Boston, Chicago, and LA, I think race relations are the best in the South by far. I say it's actually a lot more loving and tolerant down here. And I say to people, would you rather, if you wore a burqa in Birmingham, Alabama, and walked down the street, you would have no problems whatsoever. But if you wear a MAGA hat in the streets of San Francisco or New York City, you'll almost certainly be harassed and likely assaulted at some point. And that's the true racism in this country. The left has had a stranglehold on certain, minority populations when it comes to the voting, because they use the racist boogeyman every 4 years. Meanwhile, they're defunding the police. They're not allowing school choice. They're encouraging mass abortion policies where more Black babies are aborted than born in New York City. And, it's very ironic because they're pointing to us and saying people like me and you and others are even like Candace Owens are the racists, when we're the ones trying to call out their corruption that's actually leading to killing so many Black people. Defund the police, to me, is the most murderous thing that's happened. Crime rates, murder rates, violence is through the roof in areas where this happened. That to me is one of the most racist things. But instead, they want to distract people and say, hey, these random mythical, white guys that yell, this is MAGA country at 2 a.m. in Chicago, they're the real problem. We all know it's just not true.
With the whole George Floyd situation, it's like they put the black square in, they supported riots and ignored it or justified it. Now you have billions of dollars of property damage. Now you have less safe neighborhoods. Property value is suffering. So it's like they always definitely hurt people and pretend like they help. And, I moved from Los Angeles. I live in a more conservative county now. And it's fascinating because in Los Angeles, this ideology is like constant excuse making, constant lying. They're so dishonest that people are just over it. Out here, it's more about content of character, and it's a nice, safer area. So, if somebody's Black or somebody's Hispanic or Asian, like nobody cares. Everybody's just doing their thing, treating people normally. But one thing that, if you, in my neighborhood, there's a lot of like back the blue, and like people are like, just don't be a criminal, don't, vandalize things. And it's not run down like LA. So that's really all it is. If you, and that's not to say all Republicans are perfect, but really like that is the mainstream Republican Party is saying, we don't care who you are, just act normally, like, and just be a decent person. And the left wing is like just psychotic, where to me, it's like they're just spewing out it's like, can we admit that person is a good person and that person's not? Or no, but they always make excuses for the worst of the worst. And then that actually hurts race relations in some cases, because now people that just wanted to watch NFL, that have respected Black people for like 50, 60 years, now they're being bombarded in the face with these stupid Marxist phrases, knowing that it's a political agenda, not social agenda. It's not making people feel better about it. It's like, jamming this false stuff down their throats. So yeah, the left, I mean, they really just make everything worse. I wonder if they know they're doing that. Like someone like Sean King, like, do you think he knows he's like a net negative, or do you think he really thinks he's like doing something? I don't know.
Um, I don't know. It's interesting because um, I think there's a financial incentive for a lot of these people,
Right,
to constantly be throwing this hatred and getting these rage tweets and rage clicks. It does have a market.
right,
I do think that market is shrinking. And
right,
again, we have not had a free speech environment in this country pretty much since President Trump was elected. Once they realized that we were able to mobilize on the internet, um, they really started to just slowly constrict and boil the frog. And eventually, someone like Elon Musk came around and is acting as a corrective force for that. But people ask me, they're like, "Well, hey, you're suing, and now you're going to be suing Elon Musk," and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue with the lawsuit, and I like Elon, and I don't necessarily want to take money out of his pocket, but I'm really going for the legal precedent because what's
right.
happening here is it's pervasive across all the big tech platforms. You hear Jen Psaki, the spokesperson for the Biden administration, she constantly is talking about how they're in close coordination with big tech companies to
Right.
monitor disinformation. Da, da, da. That is actually one of the scariest things I've ever heard come out of any administration ever. That is something you'd expect to hear in communist China or North Korea, where the government is working closely with the police of the free speech marketplace and telling them what to censor. And you've probably realized this, but pretty much any viral story against Joe Biden gets fact checked in
Oh
his
yeah.
favor soon after. Like when he turned and shook the hand of nobody, and they're like, "No, he didn't. He just
Right. Right.
he just stuck his hand out. He wasn't shaking the hand. He's not confused." It's
Right.
it's Orwellian crazy gaslighting. So I'm hoping the overall goal, and I do think this is what's likely to happen, is that Supreme Court precedent from a 1980 case called Pruneyard, where the Supreme Court, Superior Court in California, and the Supreme Court of the United States agreed you have some First Amendment rights in a shopping mall, right? So if someone was like protesting, that was right around when shopping malls became popular. And they said you have some First Amendment rights when it's open for the public, when it doesn't intrude on your business too much. People have a right to say, hey, this mall is stiffing its employees or blah, blah, blah. You have some First Amendment rights. Wouldn't it be a very logical conclusion that we should extend that now to the digital
Mm,
marketplace, the digital shopping malls?
right.
I think it's even more relevant because it's designed for speech, not actually shopping. So your First Amendment rights should be more protected. So I think if the Supreme Court has a chance to look at this, that's what they would do. Fingers crossed. But it would give us a lot more protection going forward.
Well, good for you with going through it, because even with all these mask mandates and stuff, it took way too long to get rid of them, like way too long. But it always was like, and this, I didn't know if Ben Shapiro is going to be on the right side of this, because I've seen videos of him from the past kind of in favor of mandatory vaccination. But like you said, your lawyers and him, really pushed through and got, something through to the courts against mandates, which I really respect him now. It's funny. I'm like, I'm a thoughtful person. So it's like, if you can show me in crunch time for America that you're really on the right side, it's like, God is great. I appreciate it. So Daily Wire's done a great job. Candace has obviously done a phenomenal job. Matt Walsh, a lot of people, but the lawsuit is important. So even if Elon's there, I mean, what happened, and that would be huge for America. So he'll figure it out, and I'm sure he'll be excited. If you win, I think that he wouldn't even care.
Oh
On the
yeah.
on
Well,
the
because it would
yeah, go ahead.
apply to all these big tech corporations, and I'm represented by Harmeet Dillon and Ron Coleman, and Harmeet has a legal nonprofit called the Center for American Liberty, and mostly focuses on California stuff, which technically this would count as one of those. But we're actually very lucky that someone has stepped up to fund almost all the
Okay,
lawsuit, which could cost up
amazing.
to $1 million. So there's a lot of people that believe in this. It's just unfortunately going to take time, but there is a world where we're in the Supreme Court at the end of this year, but in all likelihood next spring.
Nice. On the fact check thing too, I know, they have a very complex control system, because if you're not paying attention, or you're just kind of like an average consumer, maybe you're a gamer like music and you're just seeing this stuff, a lot of people think, well, it's just a fact check. They're unbiased and they're just checking the facts to make sure, because there are people who lie. There are right wingers who get it wrong. But if you really study how the fact checkers operate, they're just straight up a PR team for Biden, left wingers, big pharma. They're not like, if they lie about Trump throwing like koi, to the koi fish, like some stupid petty lie about Trump throwing fish food, there is no fact check. I mean, left wingers every day of their life lie about Trump. The whole Mexican thing was totally taken out of context. I could think of like 1,000 things. And even if Trump says he saved 100 million lives from the vaccine, which I've never heard anyone, they're not going to fact check that because it goes in favor of big pharma. But, if he sneezes or Joe Biden shakes the air or waves to a guy over there, there's this, oh, he's not confused. You're going to tell me the most confused president's not confused with a fact check? So I just hope people realize, no matter who you like or if you're on the fence about something, these fact checkers are not unbiased. They're not looking to both sides to tell the facts. It's like they're trying to social engineer people into feeling informed, but really they're just sending you down the pipeline of everything the top 1% believe. It's just like I think that was probably the worst of every fact check. It's pretty bad, but they literally said Biden wasn't confused. If that's not a wake-up call to people to realize who these fact checkers are, just like straight up operatives pushing an agenda, I don't know what else you need.
I got fact checked right near the 2020 election, right after 50 Cent came out in support of Trump. I posted a meme of 50 Cent with Trump's hair, like the golden comb over, right. and it got fact checked and said altered image, and it's like, come on, I mean, it's not even close. And most people are familiar with the Hunter Biden laptop getting, right. Suppressed. And clearly there's a political, bias with all these fact checks with, the censorship. But one thing that is very interesting, and I just learned this yesterday, actually. So Elon, you follow his Twitter, he actually opens up on, what's on his mind and with everything going on. But Mike Cernovich had posted about how a guy named Jim Baker, right. He's the deputy general counsel of Twitter. So basically the second highest lawyer next to Vijaya Gadde, who was on Joe Rogan gaslighting us in front of Congress, oh, there's no censorship, please. And she also was just crying at the meeting talking about Elon Musk. So someone's about to kick over her sandcastle of censorship. So this guy, Jim Baker, a lot of people may not know this. Jim Baker was the head lawyer at the FBI from 2014 to 2018. It was directly involved in the framing of Donald Trump to get the spy warrants on him. So Hillary Clinton's lawyer reached out to this guy, Jim Baker, and said, hey, I've got some information. It's totally, partisan. And, he gets a meeting because they used to work together at the DOJ. He gets a meeting the next day with the head lawyer at the FBI. And it turns out this was all fabricated information to get a spy warrant to spy on Trump and frame him for Russia collusion, which, right. Obviously big tech facilitated for years as being the truth, even though it's false. This guy is now the second in command attorney at Twitter. And when was he hired? June of 2020. And what happened 4 months later? The Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed. And what happened 2 months after that? Donald J. Trump, the sitting president of the United States, was banned off of Twitter completely. So when we talk about the deep state, that's exactly what we mean.
At Facebook, I forget his name, Stone, I think is his last name. And I don't know if he's like head of content or he has some he's the head of some department. On his Twitter still, he has 3 tags. It's like he worked for some sort of Democrat, funding Democrats, Barbara Boxer, all these Democrats where it's like he's a clear Democrat. He's worked his whole life for the Democratic Party. And now he's sitting on here. The least that they could do at Twitter and Facebook, the least they could do is just admit that they have bias. I mean, we know that they're rigging algorithms. I've used YouTube since 2008. It's wildly rigged. Once Donald Trump won in 2016, like you said, they freaked out. Hillary Clinton, all these people said, oh my God, it was Facebook, it's Facebook. I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg, but what people don't realize is, I think, and this is my opinion, based off of evidence, that Google's like 100% in the bag. That's why you never hear them complain about Google. But Facebook, although they already have rigged their website, it's never enough for the Democrats. And they've identified that there's a lot of people over 30, a lot of Republicans. If you look at some of the data, even with the rigging that they've done. You see Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino at the top. So it's like it's almost like even though Zuckerberg has probably caved 50 times, they want him to cave 51 times. So it's like anybody, and this is the left-wing ideology, whether it's Elon, who's probably the only, like, I'm not trying to be rude, but like out of left-wing culture, who else is doing anything cool besides him? He's like the only one doing anything, and they're mad at him because it's never enough. So I hope people on the left wing realize, like, they're always going to come for you next, no matter how many times you cave. It's never going to be enough. They want total control, total information. I want to get your response to that, but real quick, I have this saved, so I wanted to play it. I'm sure you've seen this, the MSNBC clip, and since this is going to be on the podcast, of, I think, Ari Melber, people told me this is, gaslighting the crap out of his audience, acting as if, what if Elon Musk did exactly what Democrats have been doing? Let's just listen real quick.
You own all of Twitter or Facebook or what have you. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate or all of its candidates, all of its nominees, or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff and turn up the reach of something else. And the rest of us might not even find out about it till after the election. Elon Musk says this is all to help people because...
I mean, it's crazy. It's insane.
Projection. I mean, that's literally what they have been doing for probably at least 2 election cycles ever since they lost in 2016. But I mean, this goes right back to that Hunter Biden laptop story. They blocked the New York Post, a 200-year-old publication started by, I believe, one of our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, maybe. And, because they had this Hunter Biden laptop that, his, cuckoo brain left at a laptop store, and it was turned over, and you had the evidence, and it showed so much corruption with Joe Biden, with China, with Ukraine, with Kazakhstan, and so many very compromising, pictures in a sexual nature with, pure blackmail material. And Twitter turned off the New York Post Twitter account. They suspended them, and they suppressed the circulation of that laptop story. And you find this study from the Media Research Center after the election. It says 16% of Biden voters, whoever, the real ones, would have changed their vote if they knew about the laptop. 16%. So let's assume the 81 million is true, which anyone with a functioning brain knows it's not. 16% of that is like 10 to 12 million votes, which in a lot of these swing states, Biden won by 10 to 15,000 votes. So that would have completely changed the course of history. So this guy on MSNBC is just telling us what they did and worried that it's finally going to start happening to them, which I actually don't want that to happen. I just want free speech, because I know if the brakes are off, if we have free speech, we win 10 times out of 10.
They should just be honest about the rigging of the algorithms, because at least with free speech, I have to give it to them. They're being honest. Like 10 years ago, you're not getting elected as a Democrat or a Republican if you literally sit there and say the First Amendment is a bad idea, free speech is a bad idea. But now they're openly admitting, to their credit, that they don't actually believe in free speech, which is a pretty bold move. I can't believe. But with the rigging of the algorithm and stuff, it's like just the fact that they're acting like they don't do that. What do you think? I mean, obviously the Hunter laptop story, if that was Don Jr., that would have been everywhere, even if they had 1/50th of the evidence. So it's not about, credible evidence. They pushed like 7 stories on Trump with an anonymous official source that wasn't true. But, I mean, it's just common sense that they knew it's election time. This is a bad, damaging story to the candidate we want to win. Don't let that release. On that note, I forget exactly what I was going to say before that. What was I talking about?
I will just jump in and say this. It's not just the left-wing bias of these private companies, okay? That's what the argument used to be 2 years ago and back before that. It is the entanglement with the actual government in terms of what to censor. So like I said, when you have the general counsel, the head lawyer at the FBI, going and taking the number 2 position at Twitter in the office, the legal office is the one that determines who gets banned. That office is the one that banned President Trump while he was sitting commander-in-chief, which was a national security issue. But that, if you don't think that he can just get on the phone and coordinate with all his buddies in Washington, D.C. on what to ban or he can get a text message like, hey, can you guys finally do it? There's a lot of that's the government telling us who to censor. Jen Psaki gets out there every day. We, the Biden administration, the federal government, are working with these big tech companies. Myself had the California state government. We got the email where they sent to Twitter and said, take this guy down for election misinformation. And here's the thing, 98% of the time, Twitter agreed with these requests to censor stuff. And if you saw some of the requests, your head would explode. People are saying, hey, like I got, 3 ballots at my house, and they'd show a picture of it and it would be struck down and their accounts would be banned because of election misinformation. And it's like the amount of stuff that doesn't get out there that they suppress from California. But here's the thing. This was a nationwide program. This happened in Massachusetts. This happened in Iowa. They gave out an award to California for doing it the best. The National Association of Secretaries of State said, you had the best election misinformation report. This stuff, it's so systemic because they don't see it as infringement on free speech because no one's challenged it yet. They haven't had the evidence. We do. Once we get to the Supreme Court, I think things are going to change for the better.
Awesome. It's the same with the vaccine because it's like there are some bad theories that exist, just like about everything. I mean, there's bad ideas all over the place, whatever. But they're actually in some cases covering up. I remember on Instagram they made it. I think it was like blacked out for at least a month. Natural immunity. Before the reports about how natural immunity is real. I mean, shock. That was like straight up blacked out. On Twitter, people with actual vaccine injuries are being blacked out. That's the thing with the ballots, which makes the Democrats seem super corrupt. I will admit, like, I don't just believe everything I read. I think there are some people, just like in every aspect of life, that exaggerate, get carried away. But when you have this program that's never really been a part of America, where, first of all, and this, to me, this was part of Trump's demise too, and I'm really bummed out that the GOP didn't think about this earlier. First of all, I think they slept on censorship. They got elected in 2016. To be honest, I don't think I really helped in 2016. I was kind of on the, doing other stuff. But, Milo Yiannopoulos banned, Alex Jones banned. These are 2 people that helped Trump get elected. And I think the GOP had this idea, oh, well, it worked in 2016. It's going to work in 2020. And it's like, first of all, no, because they've completely changed the game since then and tried to make sure you couldn't. Then we had lockdowns. Now you have every uninformed voter, right? That just maybe they're at Coachella, maybe they're traveling, maybe they're doing something else. Everybody's stuck at home because there's nowhere else to go. So now you have probably tens of millions of people who are just like low informed people who don't vote. They have nothing else to do. Now with social media, every app, whether it's probably dating apps, it's the same with like the vaccine. Everything's everywhere. So it's like register, Instagram, Facebook, everything's registering people. Now, instead of having to go vote, they mail in a ballot to your house. So now this is never, and now this is the crazy part. You're not even allowed to talk about it, where as somebody that I live in California, I didn't even need an ID to vote. To me, that's ridiculous. I mean, like if I know, if I know somebody's address or whatever, and just their name, I guess that's just all you need. I could say I'm like Jose Alvarado or something, just make it, and like, it's that easy in California. So this is why Democrats are so guilty. If they just stuck to the facts and pointed out the exaggerations on the right and said, you're exaggerating, here's what really happened. But it's like, we're going to do this whole new thing, lockdowns, mass mail-in ballots, no ID. And if you disagree with us, you're a racist conspiracy theorist. It's so obviously like a lie. But I guess, some people are super emotional and they watch the wrong news or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in Florida, it blew my mind because I used to, live in Los Angeles, and you're right. When you vote, you just go in and say a name, and they look on the list, and if it's there, they give you a ballot. In Florida, when you go in, you have to show your ID, and they actually scan it, and so make sure it's real, and then match it up with a ballot, and then give it to you. And Trump won Florida by record margins, even though it's a swing state. And now in California, you can literally print your ballot at home. And they say that is supposed to help voter access. It's like, no, that helps voter fraud. I mean, that's an actual joke. And they put that law in place, obviously, after Newsom survived his recall, which, remember, we watched 300,000 votes switch from Larry Elder to Gavin Newsom live on CNN. And then of course, the fact check comes out. Hey, it was just an error. It's like,
Glitch.
come
Yeah.
on. Newsom
Wow.
was more popular after the recall, please. So
Yeah.
there is a documentary coming out, and I implore everyone watching this to be on the lookout. May 4th, it gets dropped. Actually, May 2nd, maybe. Dinesh D'Souza. It's called 2,000 Mules. And if you just watch the trailer to this, it will completely change your life. I'm not even exaggerating. 2,000 Mules. Basically, a lot of people don't know this, but your cell phone ping data is anyone can get it where you're located, where it pings off a tower. It's called a commercial subpoena. And as long as you know which ping you're looking for, someone can basically be paying like $30 to track your movement via the cell phone towers. And so this company for a year covertly acquired terabytes and terabytes of tracking data of so many people across the country, and then synced it up with surveillance camera of the ballot drop boxes in swing states. And they found people dropping off hundreds of ballots across a city. They would drive around, they could track them, and then sync it up with the surveillance footage and show them dropping 10 at a time, bing, 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 and in Georgia and in Detroit. I mean, and this documentary is coming out. That's just the trailer. I don't even want to know what else we find, but it is staggering how much fraud there was, and it takes time to uncover. And that's what I tweeted about California, and I got banned off Twitter for that as a registered attorney in the state of California. So corruption does not like being exposed, but we're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a generic take, but I think it's like the most obvious. They're saying it's racist to have ID, but then you need, a vaccine ID to get anywhere and an ID to do anything. Like, it's so clearly obvious that this is not right. But I guess the whole like race, thing is really like jumbling a lot of people's brains, where they're like, well, if it's racist, we got Elon Musk is racist, and free speech is racist, and like IDs are like, somehow we have to crack through that type of mindset, because it's really jumbling people. That's what I wanted to talk about as well. I think there are some good things. Like, first of all, we don't live in Germany or anywhere else, so you do have Republicans in their states. They're allowed to make their own rules. So that's at least nice. I mean, California is probably the most far gone, unfortunately. But, that's one thing. I know Rumble, BitChute, Gab, Truth, Getter, Parler, they've all taken a little chunk, even if it's small, away from Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, etc. So you start to see now, that's probably a positive improvement. Things like Rumble hosting documentaries that like Ukraine on Fire that get taken down, etc. What do you think the solution is to, I mean, this is like a multi-pronged issue, but I do feel, maybe I'm optimistic, and I think, you're probably seeing your engagement pretty high too. I feel like we're almost winning the culture war, where I follow a lot of, outside of the top 1% of celebrities who are just huge, these like what used to be big celebrities, if you're not like tapped into the culture, like the truth, nobody really cares about you. It's like old news. So I do feel like we're winning the culture. So yeah, like where do you see this going from here, besides lawsuits, etc., and like how do we win like going forward?
Well, I do think we are winning the culture war. That's exemplified in the polling data. It shows that Joe Biden has like 2-to-1 disapproval for people under the age of 35. I mean, think about that compared to like the Obama years, where it was 2-to-1 approval under the age of 35 for Obama. So there's been a massive sea change. I think it's partially because a lot of these young people, Gen Z and tail end of millennials, they're born on the internet, and it's a lot harder to censor everything on the internet. Obviously big tech, but like, you and I grew up mostly watching MTV and like listening to, CDs, and it was a very limited form of content. And, I think to your point, it's actually a really good point. Celebrity culture has changed drastically. People aren't watching the Oscars, the Grammys, the Golden Globes, and people are really just kind of tuned into the influencers and the internet personalities and companies that they really like. I personally barely ever watch TV, and I know a lot of people really don't either. You saw Netflix stock, it's tanking through the floor because people are just the old form of celebrity, where you're glorifying someone that reads lines written by someone else and pretends to be someone else on camera. And then they get their award and they, yell at you for being a racist climate changer. even though you're just like, dude, I actually like your movie. What are you talking about?
You're like,
You know,
thanks for the award. You're a piece of garbage. You're like,
yeah, if you're white and you're watching right now, you suck. And it's just like, you just are like, all right. So they're reaping the, but that's the culture in Hollywood now. And honestly, I think people like you and other, like that's who people care about these days. People with actual original thoughts and courage that are doing something creative. That's what, think about like Rage Against the Machine. Now it's Rage for the Machine. I mean, they require vaccines at their shows. The people we used to look up to as the ones that were counterculture are now the culture. And then we're the counterculture. And people always like the underdogs and the people that are a little bit rebellious. So I think there is a shift. And I would say one more thing, you were seeing Daily Wire. They're putting $100 million into kids programming. You're seeing Gab, Rumble, et cetera. I think what the opportunity is, and it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for any entrepreneurs watching, but parallel economies, everything that is rejecting us as being, too woke on the left, there's an opportunity to have the same type of thing, a parallel equivalent on the right, be it entertainment, music, products, you name it. So we're seeing that start to happen slowly.
Right. On the leadership side, there's no denying that Trump changed the game when he ran culturally, leadership wise, bold wise, putting values that I guess people cared about but weren't really at the forefront, just putting them there. And then through the pandemic of 2020, et cetera, things kind of stalled / that was, I would say, the biggest obstacle in modern history. Now I'm starting to see, and a lot of things that didn't get done. I started hearing a lot of people, that's like, I heard the logic, well, if he did this, the media would say that, right? If you do that, they'll do this to you, which is partially true, but also I think they're never going to like you. They're never going to give Trump credit. He could cure cancer, and they would say he created it. So it's like, and this is where I'm getting to, is where in Florida, Ron DeSantis has gone from somebody that people didn't really think about to I would consider at this point the top leader in the Republican Party of someone who's actually operating. And it seems because he doesn't care, or he's not thinking, well, what are they going to say if I do that? He just keeps doing it legislation wise. So kind of like how Trump changed in 2016. Do you feel the same way that DeSantis is kind of changing the Republican Party by not pandering and just talking a lot, but just every day it just seems like he's pushing the legislation that people want, just totally not caring what people say about him?
Yeah, I mean, victories beget victories. DeSantis is on a roll. In the words of Steve Bay, is going full flex beast mode. I think part of it is that so many Republican influencers and major media voices live in Florida now. Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Ann Coulter, Dan Bongino. There's a dozen influencers with over 100,000 followers and a few over 1 million in just Tampa, St. Pete, that didn't live here a few years ago. Turning Point's building an office out here. Charlie Kirk lives out here. We got Matt Gaetz, Anna Paulina. We obviously have Ron DeSantis. The whole Trump family lives out here. So you have I would say, the biggest concentration of MAGA voices. So you have that support network, and you also have a lot of people moving to Florida that are actually Republican. Florida for the first time ever is a majority Republican state by voter registration. Just for frame of reference, and by 100,000 registrations. For frame of reference, in 2016, when Trump got elected, even in Florida, Democrats had over 400,000 voter advantage. So there's been a 500,000 voter shift in the last 5 years. So DeSantis has a lot of support, a lot of wind in his sails. But I would say this overall, DeSantis is popular. Why? Because we like him. Because we support him. Because so many people around the country are saying, that's the guy we like. It's a market conclusion, right? And so I think their leadership styles are appropriate for certain times in history. Ronald Reagan ran for president twice, didn't get the nomination, then he got it, and then he was one of the greatest presidents in U.S. history. Certainly, Donald Trump flirted with running for president for decades, and then finally pulled the trigger and, won on his first time. The country is ready for certain leadership styles at certain times. And Ron DeSantis is a punch you in the mouth, but with a Harvard Law degree type of Republican who's going on offense. And a lot of people are saying that's what we want. The states are laboratories of democracy. We're looking around. We're saying some are pretty good. that's the type of style we want. And so I hope a lot of other GOP officials emulate it because it's the
Right.
winning recipe.
Everybody's got their own style, and it's hard to compare sometimes, but as someone who voted for Trump in 2020, I feel like DeSantis just totally executes, doesn't really care what people think, and also is less inflammatory. And like you said, Harvard law degree, I mean, he's young, he's in his 40s, that's pretty young for politics. And I feel like he knows how to just like say exactly what it is without doing something too inflammatory. Where with Trump, obviously it's different at president. There's different rules, et cetera. But it seems like, and I'm not saying like his tweets bothered me. I thought he's the best tweeter of all time. But sometimes I feel like Trump in his own head, he does get caught up with what the media thinks. And, it's like, I understand because it's a difficult situation when they're lying about you and your family every day. But this is my point to Republicans, to Trump, to everyone. People don't have to take it. But at a certain point, like when you get to like, if you're not in the media, stay away. But if you're at Trump and DeSantis status, it's too late to stay out of the media. They're never going to give you credit. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how much you cave. So you might as well do what you think is right and moral. And that's where, as a voter, probably they won't go at each other. And, I think whoever runs in 2024, it's hard to speculate who I would vote for because I don't even know the field. But I think DeSantis cares less about what they say and is more ready to face it. Where even now I see Trump at certain rallies and stuff, and I'm like, he seems like he's like, trying to please certain people and instead of just executing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know there's a lot of people that like DeSantis for 2024.
Right.
I think we're really lucky that we have two very strong leaders that we can rely on. And I think there's actually a lot more that are kind of waiting in the wings. I like Winsome Sears and the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. I like Kerry Lake in Arizona, and others.
Right.
So, we're kind of lucky that we have a good bench. I personally think the best plan is Trump 24 and then DeSantis 28 to 2036. And I think that gives us 12 years of American prosperity where we will have truly saved the country and put it on a good, sustainable path for a long time. And who knows, maybe we'll win after that too. But, and obviously don't want to count our chickens. We got to get election procedures in place because unless we stop a lot of this fraud, it doesn't matter how popular someone is. So that's, I'm a little bit selfish in that respect. I live in Florida and we don't want DeSantis to leave because he's so good, but it actually also gives him 2 full years. His second term would end in January of 27, and that would give him 2 full years to run for president after building up a war chest and, continuing to crush it. I think Trump deserves a third chance. I think he truly won in 2020, and I think he knows all the players now, and I think he's got a good plan of who he would I hope he would fire like 10,000 people in the first week and just really clean up the swamp and just be a wrecking ball, finish the job. I think he got a little sidetracked with some of the people that he put into key positions. I also agree with you. I think it was a tactical error to not prioritize free speech on the internet.
Yeah, I want to play a clip in a second. I want to get your reaction, but I think I read this on Twitter and I was like, this is true. They were saying the DeSantis-Gillum election might have been, the most consequential election in recent history. Like that, that was a very close election.
Definitely.
And without DeSantis, to his credit, there were some others for sure, and definitely freedom fighters. But, I would say after 2 months, 3 months, he came out and really shifted Abbott. A lot of people were just following in his footsteps. So in many ways, I felt like he kind of reversed the trend even more than Trump as far as we need to open up. We need to just drop all the talk. And, him, even in Florida, he still is able to really influence the nation even from there. It's not like he definitely leads the state, but a lot of Republican governors, I think, followed in his footsteps after seeing how popular it was that he got away with it. Or got away from it.
100%. Are you showing the clip?
Yeah, the clip. So this is I'll give it a forefront. I just have a little compilation of like Trump selling the vaccine, and I see some comments. People say, "Well, DeSantis is the same," and I'll just preface it real quick because I know it gets misconstrued. You've seen some of my posts. I've been pretty outspoken about it. if he just took credit for it and sold it a few times, it wouldn't really bother me that much. Politics is politics, and I'm not expecting him to do everything, but it's almost just the length he goes saying, it saved 100 million lives. It's the greatest human achievement. Like, I feel like he's taking something that I personally think is a travesty and, a corrupt government, big pharma collab, and selling it as if, we went back to the moon. So it's not just simply like supporting it or, it's the lengths he go. And as a voter, I kind of want to see your pitch to me as well. I would vote for Trump over Biden, if those were the two options, but it's hard for me to support him in the primary because of these. I'll just play it right now.
Vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind.
9 months, less than 9 months, you would have another Spanish flu, maybe 100 million people. Who knows? I mean, the numbers were really incredible. But you add the fact that I was the one, and this administration was the one that came up with a vaccine, which is going to save the world, okay? It's going to save. We would be, I think, worse than 1917, where 50 to 100 million people died.
Greatest achievements was getting the vaccine done in 9 months instead of 5.5 to 12 years. But the problem is, we saved tens of millions of lives all over the world, but I can't talk about it because our beautiful base, of which some of you are there, you get angry when we mention the word vaccine. Don't get angry. We did it in 9 months, less.
So I saw Cassidy Campbell was there. He said it's better than electricity. That's kind of my thing. It's not even just that I did it. It's like saying it's the greatest human achievement, a world saver, 100 million lives. I feel almost as if he's going further than Bill Gates to sell this as like the miracle drug of the future, where to me personally, that's kind of a deal breaker for the primaries. Like it's not to some people, it's a small issue. It's like, oh, it's just this one thing. To me, it's like, the lockdown, Operation Warp Speed, big pharma, these things all go hand in hand. So if you're kind of feeding the beast with, 3 spoonfuls and then you move away at the 4th, it's not really enough for me personally. But yeah, what's your pitch to me, or what do you think as a voter, as a, American?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's probably the number one thing that he's gotten heat from his base for, and he's pretty notorious for having his finger on the pulse of his base. And maybe since he doesn't have a Twitter anymore and other social media to kind of get a sense of all the posts and where people are, he, may have lost some of the bearings on that. I mean, I'm extremely anti-vaccine mandate. I think it's one of the biggest crimes in human history to have required any drug,
Right.
especially a drug that does not have long-term studies. We have a very rigid approval process, which is corrupt enough, but it's at least 5 to 10 years long. And I think what he's thinking is that if he did not have the vaccine, warp speeded, that the regime in this country and others would have kept people locked down for so much longer. That's one theory. And then I also think in his mind, he is thinking of people more his age, where the vaccine does have a better risk reward ratio because, obviously this disease we now know targeted older people, its mortality rate was so much higher, people over 65, 70. So
Do you think it saved 100 million lives though? Because like I don't think anybody thinks that. That's where I'm wondering if he just kind of took credit for it, like you're saying. I would agree with you and be like, listen, he just wants to have a minor win or something. But it's like the lengths he's going to act like this, like 100 million. There's only like 7-8 billion people on the planet, so that's quite a huge percentage. I don't even think Bill Gates is claiming that. So it seems like he's attached to this accomplishment. Someone told him it was amazing, and he's like overselling it. Like if I said these hats, these hats, it's like, all right, it's a hat, it's a vaccine or it's an mRNA shot. So that, and like you said, I know everybody, Candace, Don Jr., like I know they don't agree with him, but it's like and this is my issue too, is it's not like it's a 7-month-old clip. Like the last one was like last week. He just won't stop with it, where I'm like, it's definitely odd, and it's a red flag, because I know even his sons probably are looking at him like, what are you doing, dude?
Well, I am pretty certain that regardless of, I think he's probably exaggerating with 100 million. But I think regardless of how proud he is that he fast tracked that, he did not want it to be mandatory, and he did not want vaccine passports, and that I think is the biggest issue. I think the anger is not at the vaccine's existence by people on the right and in the center and even on the left. It's that it was forced on people, and that, to his credit, was not something he pushed at all. And you look at even someone like DeSantis, like you mentioned, he still says nice things about the vaccine because he lives in a state with a very old population.
Right.
And I do think it has saved some of those lives. How many, I don't know. But, to DeSantis's credit, he made sure that schools, employers, nothing, you cannot require that drug to engage in normal life in this country. And we're probably one of the only very few states that actually had explicit prohibitions on that. And that clearly ended up being the right move. And hopefully when we do take back power in DC, that we can pass laws to prevent this from ever happening again, because the collaboration between big government and big pharma is, like I mentioned earlier, criminal. I think it's truly criminal, what is able to be pushed through and mandated. And then they tried to hide the data for 75 years, 55,000 pages, and they don't have any legal liability since the 80s. So it is so corrupt. It needs a massive overhaul. We need big pharma reform. And I think if you're going to be able to go on TV and talk about how good some drug is, it's got to be like all the other drugs with the commercials, where they show the happy people like playing in the park and they're like, try
and
Moderna.
liability.
And then it's like side effects may include, and they list off the most horrible things. You should at least have to include that if you're going to talk about how good a drug is. I don't know why this is them.
Yeah, with DeSantis, one of my favorite things that he's done is he brought one of the frontline workers and put him as the Surgeon General. Lapido.
He's so good.
The guy's a real one. He's no joker. He's no swamp rat. He picked a real guy to lead his health department. Trump, on the other hand, I did it on my Telegram the other day. He signed a 2019 flu vaccine executive order calling for modernizing influenza vaccines. He established a task force. All of this task force stuff, if you in the executive order, it brings Department of Defense, like it's 7-8 agencies together from all over the government, bringing them together for this modern flu vaccine. And then that was a month before Event 201. And then, of course, the pandemic in March. Ivanka said, they were working on it since January. So, to me, I know a lot of people see it, and I've been very outspoken about this, so you've probably seen it. Everyone's like, well, DeSantis and Trump, it's the same. To me, it's like Trump is so below DeSantis now, because to me, he's almost a dangerous leader because he talks as if he's this deep state fighter. He constantly works with swamp rats. He constantly keeps them around him. He constantly works with Fauci and Gates. He pushes the vaccine. He funds it. He does socialism to give big pharma all this money. Everybody knew it was going to be mandated. And then he turns around and says he's against mandates. It's like, well, no one told you had to push an executive order to bring the government together and, fund big pharma $15-16 billion. So to me, saying you're against mandates after doing that, it's almost like lobbing someone else, them dunking it in my face and being like, oh, I didn't dunk it in your face. So, and that's just my opinion. I don't see Trump and DeSantis as here. I see him so far below in his lack of humility. He's taking what I would consider the most corrupt, egregious, and really disgraceful thing he's ever done, and he's elevating it like this inverted thing where he's saying it's the thing that saved the world. So that's my major red flag. Is I didn't like his Surgeon General. I thought his Surgeon General was a swamp rat. His pardon list was garbage. DeSantis is proving that he doesn't hire deep state people. And Trump, to me, I almost feel like he's just an actor at this point. But time will tell all.
I think, when you're in D.C., it's a lot different than being in the state of Florida, because you have the most powerful corrupt forces in Washington, D.C. And, maybe there was an element of not knowing who some of them truly were. But it's also, I think, knowing how powerful some of these people are. I truly think that if he had pardoned certain people on the way out, Snowden, Assange, et cetera, that he would have actually been removed from the Senate. I think that was one of the deals. I have various reasons for that, but because on the way out, a lot of us, when we knew that the votes weren't gonna, that the court cases kept getting thrown out, it looked pretty helpless. That I was like, declassify everything, like JFK, aliens, but especially the corruption in DC, declassify stuff that happened with Hillary, stuff that happened with Rush collusion, declassify it. But I think there's such an entanglement between the deep state, which is a lot of the intelligence bureaucracy, which no matter who's elected president, they're in power ultimately. Like our country is pretty much being run by the DC bureaucracy with a little bit of influence from whoever's in the White House at the time. Going back to the Twitter with the lawyer from the FBI. So, I think there are certain constraints about what he could actually do. And because you look at Trump's OG tweets, and he was savage. He was actually the most like anti-vaccine public person out there. You remember he
Right.
would post about stuff in 2012.
He was very skeptical, and he was talking to RFK and stuff. Just he was concerned with side effects, and he definitely was like a skeptic, right?
Yeah, he was anti-vax before it was cool. So it's a little different when you got to run the country. I personally, I like the idea of Trump getting back in there and just bashing heads and firing lots of people and outsourcing a lot of the DC bureaucracy. Put the FBI in Texas. Put the Bureau of Land Management in Colorado. Put the CIA in, you could probably keep that in DC. Put the State Department in New York. Get it out of there so that people can't just kind of coordinate in the coffee shops and smoky cigar shops about how to take out someone like they don't like in the White House, because I think that's what happened. So DeSantis is amazing. Like I said, we're very lucky. I will say with President Trump, he's been nipped at a couple times by his base. I remember he said something like in 2018, take the guns, then go to court. And everyone's like, no, that's not the. And he cleans it up. So he is at least responsive, which I like. I don't think you necessarily get that with Biden and others who just do whatever
that's
their
fair. Right. I want to ask you about Ukraine. I want to just one more question on that, and then I want to get your take on Ukraine, because I've liked a lot of your Instagram posts. I do think that's fair. This is definitely a positive that I've even acknowledged is when you talk to Biden or these other politicians, it's like talking to a wall. They just gaslight you as if it's not even happening. At bare minimum, I have to say I am appreciative that Trump listens and does seem to actually acknowledge what's going on more than any other politician. So that puts him above most other presidents at this point. I guess this is my last concern or question as a now registered Republican who couldn't fathom voting Democrat again unless they change their whole ideology. I'm a little nervous that to me, when I look at Trump speak about this stuff, I feel like he's learned absolutely nothing. I think he has no shame on the topic. And I don't think he needs to, because even in the betting odds, he's like a 2 or 3 to 1 favorite to win next presidency over Biden. If he runs, he's the front runner according to all odds. So this is my only concern. It's like, because everybody likes him so much and he's such a, charismatic, hilarious, and likable guy, that it's like other politicians like a Cruz, et cetera, like nobody, I'm not going to say nobody likes Ted Cruz, but he's not that popular. If he does something stupid, everyone's on his ass, right? Nobody's like making excuses for Cruz. Like, I'm sorry, Ted Cruz, but you don't have that type of base behind you. Nobody does. So that's my one issue is like, because people are so easy on Trump on this topic, he doesn't seem like he learned anything. And I feel like I don't see him correcting the mistakes that he made the first term, because I don't think he has to in order to gain power back. And that's where I would love to see people, but that's, really up to everybody and themselves, get that message truly across to make him know that he almost has to correct it or else it's not popular, versus him just being like, yeah, I could do pretty much whatever and they'll still vote for me. I think he feels like that. And I don't know that he'll do, that much if he gets a second term, but time will tell.
I think people like you who, criticize him, everyone has a right to do that. And thankfully with Elon taking over Twitter, it'll be even more so on all sides. And, if you truly think there are things that make him better, make the country better. And, you can potentially have an impact on that. Like you said, he is responsive to that. And, you've got a very big voice on the internet. So, people like you can actually help shape where this country goes. And if you see stuff that you don't like, you can make it better. I mean, it's the beauty of, what we're doing. It's a very people oriented movement. So, I think it's a healthy part of our process.
What's your take on Ukraine? I've seen a lot of your Instagram posts on it. I've appreciated them. And I don't know what the grain is anymore, because I think this kind of skews left wing, right wing. But what do you like? What's your takeaway after like 2 months of a lot of media reporting, a lot of, Jen Psaki saying Russia's going to do a false flag. You can't talk about false flags, but she will. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think's going on over there? And in your opinion?
I think big picture, Ukraine is the middle of the tug of war rope between Russia and NATO. NATO largely being led by the regime in the United States, and Russia being, led by Putin. And if you look over the last 20 years, we have slowly encroached into Eastern Europe countries. I believe it was Georgia and like Latvia and a few others that are close to Russia, and it's akin to China. Say if China started, because what happens whenever we add a new country to NATO, we usually put U.S. bases there. So we have, Poland is a part of NATO. They're right on the border with Ukraine. We have thousands of troops just sitting right at the edge of Poland, waiting to go into Ukraine if anything happens, or waiting to protect Poland as part of NATO. So I think that for the last almost 20 years, Obama was over there in 2005 as a U.S. Senator, 2006, and helped negotiate a biolab treaty. In addition with Senator Lugar from Indiana, who's since passed away, and Obama gave him a Presidential Medal of Freedom before he passed. But and it was to help deconstruct Soviet era biological and chemical weapons. But it's like it's 20 years. How long does that take? They were clearly doing research. We saw in Metabiota, Hunter Biden had emails from their executives where he greased the wheels for them to get Department of Defense contracts. Obviously, everyone knows Burisma. He was on the oil company. Joe Biden withheld $1.5 billion in loan guarantees until they fired the prosecutor investigating his son. So there's a whole lot of corruption. Ukraine, a lot of people don't know this, is like the fourth most corrupt country in the world. This is pre-invasion. They've got the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazi entanglement, Pandora Papers, which came out in 2019, showed that Volodymyr Zelensky, the actor president, had over $1 billion in offshore accounts. He has a $30 million mansion in Miami. So whole lot of corruption, whole lot of money laundering. And I just think it's a giant geopolitical battle. And, Russia doesn't want NATO or the EU on its border. And America and the EU want to expand their globalists. They want to push anyone that doesn't comply with them into submission. So I think that's big picture what's going on. But now it's unfortunately turning into just a defense industry cash cow, where the innocent people of Ukraine have to suffer because nobody's calling for diplomacy.
Right.
When has Joe Biden said, "Hey, we want to"?
Credit, I think he's one of the few GOP leaders, instead of just like being a war psycho. He did, because I have to, as much as I do critique him. This was one of my favorite parts of his foreign policy. He put out an email and said, strike a peace deal. I think he's one of the only GOP people calling for that. And acting like Zelensky can't do it.
And it was peaceful when he was in there. It's not just a theory. Putin invaded under Obama and took Crimea. And then when Joe Biden was in, he, invaded the whole country. And I think Biden instigated it completely. Do
you remember the clip before they invaded 2 weeks? Didn't he say something along the lines of like, if you take that territory, we won't do anything? Like he literally said something like that on air, like, which even if you're whatever, why would you say that? That's dumb. Do you remember
NATO
exactly what we said?
membership, there was an unwritten agreement between the original Bush administration and Russia that said we would not add Ukraine to NATO. And Ukraine agreed to denuclearize, and it was like the Abraham Accords. I don't know, I forget, but no, it's not the Abraham Accords. That's Israel. But we agreed not to add, and then over the next 20, 30 years, we slowly started to, Zelensky is openly called to be added to NATO and the EU. And Kamala Harris, a week or two before the invasion, goes over there and says that Ukraine should be in NATO. So we instigated this. We knew that was a red line. We pushed it anyway. And now the innocent people of Ukraine have to suffer. To anyone upset at, Putin, whatever, this is on you. You voted for war hawks. You voted for Joe Biden, who sent us into Iraq. He voted for that. Donald Trump did not like Iraq from day one. He kept Ukraine safe and protected for 4 years while he was in office. And he's the only one calling for peace now. You clearly don't understand that Joe Biden is a puppet of a globalist regime that loves war. It's profitable. It keeps people distracted from his domestic failures. And what has it ultimately accomplished? Ukraine's just going to be blown to smithereens, and neither side's going to have what they want in the end. So you might as well call for peace now.
There's a lot of people. I mean, I don't watch Fox News, but I've heard that Mark Levin and Sean Hannity are, parroting what a lot of the left wingers are saying. I've got called a Russian by some like crazy lady she's conservative, and I guess she's Ukrainian, so she's like emotional about what I said. But a few things like, with the George Floyd thing, whenever I put a black square, it's nice to try to be nice, but just because you're putting a square or a Ukraine flag in your bio, it doesn't really mean anything. And also, if the result of what you're doing ends in billions of dollars of property damage, you didn't help black people. It's all fake. And it's the same thing with Ukraine. And in my perspective, as I see it, like you said, this goes back way further back. I know the 2014 revolution was a big one, which, they tell you January 6th was worse than 9/11, but the revolution of dignity in Ukraine, where 80 to 120 people were dead, you have the mainstream media supporting a legit insurrection, not like a goofy, like, look at me on Instagram insurrection, like 80 to 120 people dead. Now you have a pro-Western government. You have a bunch of like neocons like Lindsey Graham flying over there talking. So this was all in the works. And I guess the question that I have for you, well, first I want to say, I think personally that they're almost like our regime and even like Ukraine, Zelensky, I'm not saying Putin's innocent or anything, but I think he's sacrificing Ukrainians just like Biden's kind of sacrificing us. Like the sanctions are hurting us potentially more than they're hurting Putin. And he's got leverage over Germany with the gas. Like they're sacrificing us and acting as if they're saving it the same way they sacrificed Black Americans and claim that they helped them. I think it's the same sort of dynamic that a lot of right wingers are falling for, because there are a lot of right wing voices pushing this war. But you could respond to all that. And also, I remember before I was conservative, when I just was rooting for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton in 2016, I was younger, didn't know that much. I kept getting called a Russian. And I thought it was weird because I've never been to Russia. I'm not Russian. And I didn't know anything about geopolitics. So like I got called a Russian 50 times. And then, as the 2016 election's coming out, I'm watching the debates and I'm like, oh, Donald Trump's kind of a real one, right? Like I'm like, and then I start reporting and saying like, hey, the media's lying about Trump. I was just an honest person. I started getting called a Russian. So now we're at war with Russia. But back then, I knew nothing about Russia or geopolitics. It seems as if they were like grooming this war since then. I mean, I'm sure you've got called a Russian bot. Now I have conservatives who are on my side saying, oh, you might be working with Putin. Like they accused you of that 2 years ago falsely. And now you're going to say that to me because you're emotional over this war. So yeah, what do you think all that was about? Like calling everybody a Russian bot who like loves the country?
Well, I think it was media programming, for the entirety of Trump's time in office. They called, they were saying Russia collusion. We had the special counsel for 2 years.
Right.
They were saying Putin did it, and they, searched high and low, left and right, up and down. And all they found was a few Facebook trolls that did nothing. They showed some of the memes. They get like 500 likes. I mean, come on, that didn't change the election. The American people changed the election. So I think there's a long-standing hostility between the DC establishment and the Russian government, because I think a lot of the DC establishment is aligned with globalist interests, and I think Russia is not aligned with that. They don't like the EU. They don't really like the UN, and Russia certainly has major problems. Authoritarian. Putin's a tyrant. He's
Right.
terrible. But it's like, so is Zelensky. Zelensky's terrible. He
Right.
literally directly funds neo-Nazi National Guard battalions. The stuff that's been going on in the Donbass region is atrocious. And, you know, he's taken bribes from Igor Kolomoisky, who's literally under investigation by our FBI for money laundering in the United States. So it's bad guys on both sides. And like I said, you're right. I think Joe Biden and, you know, the people he works for, which is a lot of the, you know, the Davos, Bilderberg, Obama style crew, they hate America. They hate America. The invasion coming across the southern border is intentional. The gas crisis is intentional. The food crisis is intentional. They hate America. They believe that the number one threat to America is its own people. They think that moms going to school boards are domestic terrorists. This is a hostile, America-hating regime. And yeah, this war, all this does is use American military power to flex on a perceived enemy of the globalist regime, which is Putin and a variety of other people. You know, China released the Wuhan lab virus. They steal our intellectual property, and you barely hear about how they should be the number one geopolitical foe of the United States of America. They openly want to take down America. So there's just a whole lot of big globalist forces. And yeah, I was frankly as surprised as you to see people like Hannity and Levin and others just be super pro-war, like right off the bat. But I will say the strength of grassroots social media voices really helped tamper down that enthusiasm for war. And we have held a solid 30-40% of the country that does not want this to exacerbate into a full-blown war where American sons and daughters are sent to die to cover up the corruption of the Biden crime family who made millions of dollars in Ukraine. So I think with today's social media environment, we may not have necessarily even invaded Iraq back then. Afghanistan, right. I think we probably would have, but enough truth has gotten out about the corruption, and people don't. That's just to their detriment. People don't forget this stuff, and the defense industry is very powerful, and they have a lot of money. And I feel like Big Pharma, got their spin at the wheel for 2 years with all the money making, and the defense industry was like, "Hey, it's our turn," but we're fighting back. And to Trump's credit, I think he. Is their worst enemy with keeping the world stable and with keeping us out of foreign wars.
I won't keep you too long, but I guess you talked about the Wuhan lab leak theory that was banned for a year until they realized that it was the most plausible theory, and then they put it back on. That made me think of this new Rumble video that's going around that I've been asked about 100 times about, like snake venom in the water. That which would contradict the Wuhan theory. Like, what do you think of that? Because I feel like so many conservatives are like really buying that pretty heavy.
I've seen parts of it. I admittedly have not watched the whole thing, and frankly, I am not as up to speed on a lot of the medical terminology that was in there. It was actually very, very kind of in-depth medical analysis. I think that no matter what, the truth ultimately comes out. And I tend to think that any videos that are popular that are banned not because they're bad, but because they expose people. And I don't know if that necessarily applies to this video, but just like with the Wuhan lab theory, I was kind of quiet on that before. I was quiet on the biolabs in Ukraine. I was like, what? I've heard this. I've heard people talking about it. I'm just going to kind of sit and wait and see, get more information. So that's kind of where I'm at on the.
When that lady said it, that was pretty wild, right? Because there were theories about it for a month, and then that lady said it in front of Congress or whatever.
Yeah. And it's like, so,
right.
we have learned that no matter what, you just wait and things eventually rise to the surface. And if it's an
Right.
important issue, if it's truthful, it will ultimately be confirmed or something. So we'll wait and see. And that's just, I'm in a wait and see approach because it's a little bit
Right.
above my pay grade in terms of the medical terminology, but it's
Right.
it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with this existence. Everything should be allowed, and then you could debate it. I'm not buying it. I think they did a lot of like correlation equals causation, and even on BitChute and stuff. I use BitChute. I appreciate them. Sometimes the top couple videos I think are complete nonsense, where it's like a bunch of truth mixed with stuff because they go into remdesivir, they talk about some stuff, and it's like they butter you up with things that you agree with, and then they hit you with something that you don't. There's a lot of that, but at the end of the day, I would say if any media people are, concerned with misinformation or things that they consider wrong, the whole reason that BitChute and Rumble wouldn't even exist if you guys didn't censor people. And also they wouldn't exist if you told more truth. Like you're not good at your job. So people then realize you're lying. I mean, watching MSNBC, Brian Stelter, I mean, if you're going to get a liar, get a better liar than that. So then people go to other platforms, and it's like, if you really want to stop a lie, you can't do it with more lies. You got to do it with truth. So
Well,
I agree with you as far as
I would love to see like a reply video that breaks
Right.
down, because like I said, there's so much medical terminology that like I can't like be like, oh no, that's like totally backwards.
Right.
They did that wrong. Like I heard this video the other day with talking about Fauci and Bill Gates, and I can't stand both of them. I think they're both truly evil people. And they mentioned something like, oh, do you know that Bill Gates was Fauci's roommate at Cornell? And I'm like, Bill Gates didn't go to Cornell. He went to Harvard,
Right.
So instantly I'm like, all right, it's like, I know that's not true. It's like, what else is? So,
Right.
but like I said, I'm going to kind of let the more medical people dig into that other video, and eventually people will kind of have a commonly held conclusion on. But right now, I'm just
smart.
listening.
No, that's fair. The best reply that I've seen is from Dr. Pierre Corey. He was on Rogan's show. He's like a big, I would say, alternate doctor who's been beating at the media narrative. I think he talked about the one of the drugs that must not be named. So he's pretty good. He wrote a whole Substack about it that I read, and like you said, it was filled with all this jargon that I wouldn't be aware of. But he basically, in his medical terms, disproved it, where I would say if people are interested in an alternate perspective, try to find Dr. Pierre Corey's Substack, because it's a legitimate good article. It's not like when do you remember the Judy Mikovits documentary that blew up in 2020? She was a doctor. It was called Plandemic. It went crazy viral. So I would read counter articles because I'm like, I don't know this lady. It sounds good to me, but all of the mainstream articles were just so dumb and fake and like a character assassination. So it made me not trust them. But Dr. Pierre Corey, I think, is one of the good ones. And he wrote like a fair counter article, not just some like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, game over, just don't think about it. He went into depth in all of the claims and
that's what you should do. You shouldn't
Right.
censor stuff. You should combat it with more speech. If it's a truly bad idea, it will be easily disproven. And that's what the left has to get comfortable with, unless they know so many of their theories and positions are BS that any truth is actually just going to cripple it,
Right.
which I think is the case. But overall, bad speech should be countered by good speech, and let the American people decide. That's how you have a democracy in a constitutional republic, is people make the decision. So.
I think that's exactly what's going on. I mean, it's sad because I think there was a time where both sides had something to bring to the table. But unbiasedly, as fair as I could be, I mean, the left, it does seem like, although the Republican Party still has a lot of kinks to work out, it almost seems like the left is wrong about almost literally everything on every level of like politics, philosophically, how I've gotten to success, my mindset, families, like everything that I've learned growing older and wiser and getting more happy. They're wrong about it completely. So I think for sure that's what's going on. Their ideas do not win in a free competition, so they have to censor everything. But I'm gonna let you get your last word. I guess as crazy as things are, I think we're definitely two people who have, God willingly, been able to capitalize on the fact that they were so dishonest. And I don't know about you, but I think you're pretty similar. I don't know that me or you ever intended to be in this position. You had a job. I wanted to do music. And, it was more just like the dishonesty and just like the wild amount of terrible lies that they did that inspired me to even be there. So in a weird way, I'm grateful that they're so garbage because they've allowed, people like us to really do a better job.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason people like us have, millions of followers in a relatively short period of time, and CNN with $300 million couldn't get more than 10,000 subscribers to their streaming network. It's because the American people actually know the truth. I would rather have the first 100 people liking any one of my posts running this country than the top 100 bankers at Goldman Sachs. Because no matter what, whether you're formally educated or not, I think good people have they can smell the BS, and they have a good heart and a good soul. And, you don't need to know every treatise and philosophy book and whatever to be a good person, to know how to run a country. So I think it's a battle of good versus evil overall right now. A lot of the people that oppose us on the lower levels of opposition are actually just brainwashed. I think they're being controlled by very powerful, evil, manipulative people at the top. So I pray for them. And I think more and more keep waking up along the way and joining us. And eventually I think we will be victorious in reclaiming this country and giving it back to the people.
Thanks for joining me, guys. This is Dreamer Podcast. Make sure you search it. We're on Spotify, Podbean, Apple, all the alternate platforms. Anywhere podcasts are found, just search Dreamer Podcast. And DC Draino, I know that's where you can find them on Instagram. Where can they find you on social media? It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, where can they find you? Just
it's all
anywhere.
DC Draino on everything except Twitter because I got banned.
Yeah, he runs. I follow him on Instagram. He's been great with the Ukraine stuff in general, I would say. And I got to hang out with him for a few days and see him. He's a hard worker. So I've seen him. I mean, you were always killing it, but I've seen how big you've gone. And I'm like, I know why. It's because, he's dedicated. He's got a great work ethic and passionate.
I love it. I love doing this. It's a calling, not a job. So.
Amen. All right. God bless you guys. Dream Rare Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. And thank you to everybody giving me a 5-star. If you gave me a 4-star, I see you and that's disrespectful. But jokes aside, thank you guys for rating it and subscribing on podcast platforms.